Good morning, everyone. Good morning, everyone. My name is Jotam. I'm from Capasso. So I've been given 15 minutes to talk about 8 years. And I think by the time I finish, I'll be having a master's in summarizing because I would have been able to summarize 8 years in 15 minutes. So Capasso is a mechanical licensing society based in South Africa. So I will just start there with the structure of collective management in South Africa. So this is just to show you how management, collective management of rights is done. And then from there, we can then drill down to Capasso. So firstly, Capasso is a South African Music Mechanical Rights Society. And from its formation, the intention was to make sure that Capasso looks after the reproduction rights of music in South Africa. And even though we are based in South Africa, we represent the reproduction of all types of music from all over the world through our partners that we deal with, through bilaterals and different forms of agreements. And then over and above that, Capasso also operates as a digital licensing hub for the African for the African continent, and we have got bilaterals with 25 CMOs whom we license in those countries as home territories, and one of them is Cape Verde, and we've got Solange here, and so whenever your music is used in Africa, it will be very easy to be collected, and we do that and by way of giving one license to all the digital service providers, and we process that, and then you get your payment. So we cover the whole content. The benefit of this is that some of the streaming exploitation on the continent is still very small, and it's uneconomic for anyone to go and have a license in some of the countries because it's still starting, and it's either people do not have credit cards and they are not able to stream and all those kinds of things. So because of those challenges, it helps everyone on the continent when we are having one license through the hub, which covers the entire continent, and as a result, those that are earning more revenues will be able to cover for those that are still yet to earn, and then we benefit everyone. The other benefit is that the ability to give a license for the entire continent also helps the artists and the composers themselves, in that it allows the DSPs to have that convenience of a license and then be able to launch everywhere they want to launch without having to worry about the license, because they can get a license as a one-stop shop. And then this year, Capasso is a member of CISAC, and it is also a member of BIM. And the importance of this membership allows us to be able to adhere to binding resolutions, which gives us the ability to meet certain qualities which are beneficial to the members, because CISAC is very strict with the rules and what it is that we need to be able to adhere to for the benefit of the composers. And being a member of CISAC and also BIM allows us to be able to meet those standards and also to measure ourselves against the best standards throughout the world. And then in terms of membership, Capasso has got 9,000 members, 1,000 of whom are publishers and 800 of whom are composers, direct composers. So Capasso is only 8 years old. Capasso started in 2014, and within that period, we have managed to grow the membership to about 9,000. And in terms of what we do, how we have managed to grow the membership is because joining Capasso is very easy. We don't have restrictions as to how you can be a member of Capasso. You just need to have songs that are active on the market, and then you can be able to join Capasso. Whether or not the songs are earning, it's immaterial for as long as those songs are active. But what then happens is that the songs have got to be used for you to be able to earn. But the songs would have been registered and all that, and you become a member. So being a member of Capasso is very easy. Capasso deals with a lot of partners. We have got 48 bilateral agreements, and 26 of these bilaterals are in Africa, and then we also have 12 bilaterals, which are, in fact, it's 38, not, hey, the maths there, it's 38, not 48. So 12 of the bilaterals are with the rest of the CMOs across the world. And this actually also helps us to be able to represent all, apart from the direct members that we have. We also have a lot of publishers and composers that are represented by other CMOs who then give us their rights through those CMOs, and then we collect and then we distribute it on their behalf. And in the same way, we also do that for those other societies. So in terms of digital, in Europe, we are represented by Unison, and we are very grateful to the relationship that we have with Unison, where they represent us for Europe, and we also represent them for Africa, which benefits our members in that their expertise in Europe helps us get the licenses that we require, and our expertise in Africa also helps them to get the licenses that are required. And then we share the costs, and we are able to represent our members correctly. And then in the US, we are represented by Music, who collect on our behalf from the MLC. Then in terms of licensing in Africa, and I think the system is changing slowly now, because whenever I went to the music markets to meet them and all that, people talk about the African market. There's nothing called the African market. There are 54 markets in Africa. So when we talk about the African markets, we actually confusing ourselves, because in total there are 54 markets in Africa. We don't have free trade across the continent. Each country has got its own rules. Each country has got its own legal issues that affect the country. So you need to be able to understand what happens in the 54 countries for you to be able to license in the 54 countries. And the DSPs that were sitting here will tell you how easy it has become to be able to deal with the 54 markets through the hub that we have as a continent, which allows us to give the one license. And then in terms of the exchange controls, it is very difficult on the African continent, particularly with exchange restrictions, which actually hamper a lot of development that needs to be done. Firstly, people won't be able to subscribe on digital platforms because they can't, because all the digital platforms, most of them are based outside the country. You need to pay in foreign currency. You need exchange control approval in order to be able to pay that, which means you can't use your credit card and all those kinds of things. And then also the economic situations are all different. So with the hub, it makes it very easy for all of us in that big or small countries are able to issue a license, and then it makes it easy for the DSP. It benefits the members. It also allows everybody to have a hand and play a role within the market. Now, going to the African digital licensing. So what we did, even though we are a mechanical rights society, when the DSPs launched in Africa and in about 2016, we firstly had the downloads services, and then we had the streaming services launching in 2016. We realized a need to be able to license these DSPs, and the processing of these of the reports that we were receiving became very expensive, such that it was not possible for small societies like ourselves to be able to own a processing system, but rather to look at partners that we can deal with and also be able to offer a license that covers the entire continent, which then allowed us to be able to grow, as opposed to starting from a very small start. We started at a much better position. And then we have licensed all non-music services as well as all video-on-demand services. Currently, the video-on-demand services are coming, and we have seen an improvement in the revenues that we are getting from the video-on-demand services. As far as streaming services, we have been able to license all non-streaming services, including those that actually come from the African continent. So we are now, at first we were trying to chase the rest of the world in terms of licensing of streaming services and all that. But now with VODs and everything, we are now at par with the rest of the world. We are also licensing at the very same time that the world is licensing these services. And in fact, what happens now is that as services are trying to launch on the African continent, they actually come to us so that we can be able to give the licenses before launch. And we are also grateful that the licensees are becoming more and more aware of the need to get a license before they launch on the continent, as opposed to previously where we had to try and chase and look after them to see whether or not we can give them the licenses. Right now, we are in a situation whereby they come, we get to agree on, they tell us their plans, when they will be launching and all that, and we start negotiating a license before they can launch, and by the time they launch, the creators are also able to be paid. We also license production music. So in Africa, the sync rights of, particularly for mood music, is still very popular, and in South Africa in particular. So we also license through a blanket license with broadcasters, and this benefits our production music libraries. So what they do is they give us the rights, and then, but the right is not an exclusive right. They give us a non-exclusive right so that they can be able to negotiate. Where there is an individual deal, they can still go and do an individual deal which could be better than what we can get them through the blanket license. But we also do license that, and in that sync right for production music, because usually with production music, the production library controls both the sound recording and the musical works. So our blanket license covers both those rights, and we do that for Africa as well, particularly with the multi-territorial broadcaster, which is based in South Africa. So we found it easier. So for, particularly with MultiChoice, for all the countries where MultiChoice is operating and where they are reproducing. Currently, they are reproducing in only 4 countries. So we agreed with the societies in those countries to say we can give them one license. Again, we are transferring the convenience of multi-territorial licensing, not only on digital platforms, but also on broadcasting. And this has been, the broadcaster found to be a very interesting model, which allows them to get a license in South Africa, which covers the rest of the continent where they do operate. Now, these are the types of licenses that we do give. Apart from the broadcast and the digital, we also give ancillary licenses. So these include the licenses like the small license for in-store radio, online radio, and all that. And again, in terms of our distributions, we distribute digital distributions every quarter. So for the period January to June 2022, we have already distributed at the end of June. And so for the period April through to June 2022, we will be distributing in September for all digital collections. So we distribute every quarter, and our commission is 12.5% across the board, irregardless of whether it is online or it is offline. Our commission is 12.5%. As opposed to traditional collective management organizations, we have got a fixed commission where when a member joins Capasso, they know exactly what commission they are is gonna be deducted from their royalties. We don't, you don't get surprised when you get your statement. You know it upfront before you join Capasso. And then with broadcast, we also distribute biannually, and obviously the reason for distributing broadcast biannually is because the reporting that we get from broadcasters is not as good as the reporting that we get from the digital service providers, and also the modern types of processing are mainly suited for distributing digital, and we're still struggling to be able to process broadcast reports, because like we sometimes get, particularly from the public broadcaster, we get PDF, Q sheets, and all those kinds of things. Now we need data capturers to be able to capture that. So we hope that going forward, we should be able to distribute. And then the ancillary services, because they are small, and usually it's uneconomic for us to distribute it as regularly as it is with the big licenses. So we distribute that annually depending on whether or not we need to proxy it or whatever we are going to do. And then these are the challenges that we have in terms of trying to meet our goals and our objectives. So firstly, the issue of metadata is a huge problem in that we are not getting the metadata that we require. We heard from the previous panel the issues that have got to do with the ISRC code being the one relied on in order to distribute musical works. So I think there is need for us to find a better way to have the music having the ISWCs as it goes onto the digital platforms, just like we do with the ISRC code, so that it can be easier and faster to be able to identify. We can be distributing on a quarterly basis, but if the songs have not been identified, it means we can only be able to distribute it when we then run the reprocessing of backdated claims, because we will need time to be able to really match that ISRC with the ISWC and see who, in terms of the musical works, really owns that song. So while the artists will be getting paid much faster, it delays the payment of songwriters. And I think we need to get to a point where songwriters and artists are being paid at the same time. And we are sure that we should be able to get there. And then the other challenge that we have is that of market fragmentation. Market fragmentation is really caused by the issue of carving outs of services, where we have a lot of licenses coming and licensing at the same time. We appreciate that it allows competition and all that, but when it comes to the residuals that were being discussed again in the previous panel, we feel it actually affects, particularly as we have got a metadata problem. What it means is that we are not going to be able to collect everything within the time limits of 18 months that are required, and as a result, the money that remains then eventually goes into residual, and when it goes into residual, it is shared, including those that would have already made their claims, and we feel this is a disadvantage to local artists and to local composers in the music that are operating within our territories. So we feel that this is something that really needs to be addressed, and then so that's the residual policy. So I think that's my summary of our past 8 years and where we started and what we have achieved so far. Thank you.